Hello everyone. It has been a very long time. I was busy doing other things with my life. For example, I got married, so that is very exciting, and I was traveling with my family and with my now husband's family after that, so I didn't really have time to film anything, and I think taking a break was good because it made me feel excited about everything, but I also was kind of in a reading slump. I was still reading lots of books, and I am still reading like 3 books right now, but none of them are giving me innate joy. Like after watching a lot of other YouTuber content, it made me feel creative again, and it made me feel like I wanted to do something a little bit fun and light. So I saw all these like mid-year freak out tags, and you know, the mid-year has come and gone, but it's September now. It's giving back to school. I'm wearing my alma mater's sweatshirt to kind of lean in to that vibe, even though it is fully 70 degrees outside and it does not feel autumnal outside at all. We're going to talk about something else, not the mid-year freakout tag, but I created my own list of questions, but here it is, and I'm going to call it the back to school book tag. Okay, question number 1. What is the most intellectual book that you read this year? I think that the book that broke my brain this year was Doppelgangers by Naomi Klein. It was split into 2 or 3 different parts. I honestly can't remember now because I think I read it in like March or April. But the first part was a literature review of all the different ways that doppelgangers are apparent in society, and in like books and movies. And I'm so sorry if you can hear that siren. An ambulance is driving down my street. She was just really thorough, and I really enjoyed that part. And then number 2 was how the concept of doppelgangers can show itself in like real life people, especially in a political context. So think about, you know, your aunt and uncle that live in Florida that you don't see that much, and then you have Thanksgiving with them, and these are people that you grew up with. Like, you know them, you know that they are caring and considerate and kind people, but then they talk about their political views, and it is so divorced either from the reality that you live in and inhabit, or so divorced from the people that you know them to be. That's kind of like the doppelganger effect that she is looking into. So nothing supernatural, but you know, there is a kind of like eerie vibe to that. So that was a really fun book to read, and I think it's one of my favorites of this year, so I definitely recommend it, but it made my brain hurt. But maybe you guys are smarter than me. Okay, number 2 is the most autumnal book that you've read this year. I really shouldn't have used that word in the intro because now I'm using it again and it doesn't really sound like a word anymore. I've been in a big tea, like a boba phase, and this is probably the 3rd time that I've spent money on this week. And I got like a rose green tea with the cheese foam, which like I'm a huge fan of. I know that's kind of polarizing. What was the question again? Oh yeah, the most autumnal book that I've read this year. I'm gonna say Norwegian Wood. It's not typical. It's not like dark academia or, you know, New England fall. Like, I would say The Secret History is also a very autumnal book. It's also not spooky, but it does have like the main character, I think his name is Toru, is in university, so he talks about that school setting. There's a lot of like scenery of the forests and mists and fog, and all of that gives fall. And then on top of that, because of the magical realism aspect that Murakami dabbles in, it is like a little bit creepy and spooky and eerie at times. So I think that I would say that is the most fall-like book that I've read so far. Okay, number 3 is, what is a book that made me feel like I was seeing old friends again? And I feel like this was a hard one because I don't do a lot of rereads, and I don't think I did any rereads this year. Well, I think I reread Jane Eyre in January actually, but that did not make me feel like I was seeing old friends again. The one that did make me feel like that was Dealing with Dragons by Patricia Reed, and I have this really vivid memory of sitting in the Seattle library with my best friend at the time, when I was like 9 years old, and we were just like kind of like getting lost in the stacks, and I picked up this book because she recommended it to me, and I read half of it, but then by the time I got to halfway, I had to go home, like my dad came and picked me up, so I wasn't able to finish it. And I guess fully 18 years later, and I finally finished the book, and it was so cute. But like just having that memory associated with it, like having my friend associated with it, and I'm so lucky that she still lives near me, so we get to hang out and talk about books still. But that made me feel very, very nostalgic. Oh boy, number 4 is the book that made me feel like I was slogging for extra credit. I would say that this was Foundations by Isaac Asimov. I do like science fiction. I read not a lot of science fiction, but I would say maybe like 25% of what I read is science fiction. You know, that obviously changes from year to year. And I basically took it upon myself to read this like keystone foundational book, no pun intended, of the science fiction genre. And the first third, I was loving it. It was like so interesting. You could definitely see how a lot of different science fiction authors had taken inspiration from that book. After that, it got so repetitive and so boring. It was a short book. I think it was like less than 200 pages, but it felt like it was a billion pages long. It felt terrible, and I did not like the end. It really did feel like I was doing extra credit that would never get graded and was for nobody. So that was, you know, I'll take a sip for that. Okay, number 5 is the crispest book that I read this year, aka Flawless Execution. This is a hard one. It is so subjective and honestly kind of just like a weird question, but I would say that I'm gonna go out of pocket and I'm gonna say The Double by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I read this because I have given myself the challenge. After I read Doppelgangers by Naomi Klein, I gave myself the challenge of trying to read every single book that she mentions in Doppelgangers, and I have been doing it. The Double was one of them. I think it was the first one, and that book was so good. It's like a novella by Dostoevsky, so not one of his like crazy long works, and it's basically about a man that is really mediocre, just like mid at everything. And one day he wakes up, he goes to work, and he like realizes that he has a doppelganger, basically, that came to work and is also working, and like that doppelganger has the same name as him. Obviously there's some like suspension of disbelief because everyone's just like, oh, it's your cousin, and maybe people have the exact same names more often in Russia. And it's basically about his like descent into insanity. But Dostoevsky really makes you feel like the main character, and like there are so many nuances with like the wording and wordplay, and the main character is basically just really bad at communicating and expressing himself, and you just want to like hold him by the collar and shake him and be like, you're such an idiot. It's a very big skill for the author to make you feel like that, to even make you care like that much about the main character and what the main character is doing. So I would say that is the book that had the best execution that I've read so far this year. Okay, question number 6 is what book is preparing me for spooky season, aka October? And I think that was the book that I chose for my last month's book club, which I run, and that was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And it was also short. It was probably like 75 pages on my Kindle, on the Kindle version that I checked out from the library, and it was so good. I realized when I started reading it that I actually like didn't know that much about it. Like everyone says Jekyll and Hyde, it's kind of like a colloquialism now, and I have always interpreted that to mean like, oh, someone has both like good and bad in them, like, oh, like they can be nice one day and nasty the other day. And that's like really, I think, kind of a departure from what Robert Louis Stevenson was trying to portray in the book. You know, the plot is that there is a chemical doctor, Dr. Jekyll, and he takes this potion and becomes Mr. Hyde to gallivant around town and do these kind of immoral things that are very vague, and nobody really expands on them in the book. But the narrator is Dr. Jekyll's friend, a lawyer, Mr. Utterson. And it's kind of written like a detective or like police novel, even though it's like a lawyer trying to figure out who Mr. Hyde is and what exactly his relation is to Dr. Jekyll, who is like his friend. But yeah, that book was really great. It was kind of like a mystery and a thriller, and a classic, so what's not to love? Okay, number 7, a book that would make me the AP English teacher's pet. Okay, I actually have two answers for this. The first is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I did read this in sophomore English, and it was one of the first dystopian novels that I read, and after The Giver. I think The Giver was the first one I read, and I was in 8th grade, and I was not understanding what was going on. But in Brave New World, it is about a future society where everyone is separated by their caste, which is kind of like a chemical thing that they do to the fetuses in lab, and they make you like an alpha or a beta or a gamma or a delta, etc., etc. And the lower you get on the Greek alphabet, the kind of worse you are in terms of social class. But they also tell everyone, they do this thing called like conditioning. It's basically like Pavlovian conditioning, where they tell you like, if you're a delta, you're like, oh, I'm so glad that I'm a delta. I don't have the responsibility of the alphas, and I hate the color that they wear, because everyone has like a uniform. Having like a mother or the physical act of giving birth is seen as disgusting, and that book is pretty hard to get through. It's short. The language is not that difficult, but the concepts and just references that it drops to the Bible, to Shakespeare, etc., I think make it like an English teacher's wet dream. And the second book that I would choose would be Portrait of an Artist. The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. I'm so sorry, I keep getting confused because I'm reading The Portrait of a Lady, or A Portrait of a Lady. Oh my god, why are people like this? So The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. It is definitely nowhere near as hard as I've heard Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake to be. It's not stream of consciousness. That being said, it is still really weirdly written, and there are also a lot of like biblical and like Greek, Shakespearean references that probably went over my head. I really think I should reread it if I truly want to understand it, but I do think that it would make my English teacher very proud of me. Okay, this is the last one, and it's not a question. Well, it is a question, but it's not like the other ones. And it's, how's the school doing in terms of diversity? I would say kind of poor. I read 56 books so far, as of right now. Out of these, 21%, 21 were written by women, so that's 38%, so that's better than 21%. Only 9 were written by a person of color, which is 16%. And I don't even want to tell you how many were written by a woman of color, because it's gonna be low. So that's something that, I could improve on. I tend to read a lot of Victorian novels and a lot of classics. I would say pre-established classics, and those don't have the best track record for being diverse. So it's definitely something that is going to have to be intentional on my part, but there's room for improvement. If you have any suggestions of books that I should read or think that I would like, please drop them in the comments below. And I wish you all a wonderful fall. I hope that you also get to drink some delicious drinks, and I hope you have a great rest of your week and your weekend. Goodbye!